Well, for more reaction on some of the outcomes of today's proceedings, we're joined by criminal law expert Ian Allis. Ian, good evening to you. Thanks for your time. So certainly an explosive day of evidence in the Senzo Meyiwa trial. Let's first begin with, of course, what is a very important development. The fact that Tumelo Madlala has pointed out, at least according to him, the suspect that he says was behind the pulling of the trigger on the day that Senzo Meyiwa was killed.
Evening, Kathy, and evening to all the viewers. One can go ahead and say it might not be the smoking gun that one would actually imagine it from a layperson's perspective. But what basically has happened here, there's a lot of dispute over the manner in which he was identified and pointed out in court and the validity of that. There's two issues to that. Number one, it's whether or not there's going to be somebody who's going to corroborate what is actually said by the witness, which will actually give it more of a weighting. If there's nobody who's going to corroborate it, his testimony he's pointing out might not be as extreme and as beneficial as the state might hope. It must also not be forgotten, from what I understand as well, is that same accused happens to be awaiting a bail application, which obviously something like this may have an impact with regards to the argument of bail if he does proceed with the bail application, and might be utilized from the aspect of the state to block the bail being granted. So there's various reasons why it wasn't the perfect way of identifying a party, and it would have been obviously stronger had it have been done several years back and through an identity parade. But realistically, it's going to all come down to how this evidence is going to be corroborated by any other witnesses within the house with regards to that specific accused.
Of course, after today, we have a better sense of what the defense in this matter is intent on arguing in as far as what they believe happened on the night Senzo Meyiwa was killed. And it's really through this revelation, a claim that has come out of the defense lawyers around a fight that had broken out between the people in the house, all of it stemming from some of the relationships that had existed between Senzo Meyiwa, Kelly Khumalo, and allegedly her sister.
Oh, it's starting to take more of a soap opera type of idea. Maybe one of the TV channels will go ahead, instead of Netflix publishing it as a documentary, you might want to go ahead and introduce this as a bad soap opera. These type of revelations, although controversial and somewhat scandalous, one must take a look at the version of the defense has always been that it was one of the people who were in the house at that stage was responsible for his death. That has been what the defense has been angling for since the beginning. This whole stuff just kind of, if one could say, adds spice to the details and creates a lot of talking points, whether it's really important. And to the extent of its importance, it is possibly debatable, and very well might just be a way of trying to goad the state into calling those people as witnesses so that they could be subject to cross-examination, so that they can also deal with what has been said in the allegations. So there might be more to it than just trying to create sensationalism, if one could say, but it might be also used as a specific tool. Not saying that anybody's lying about it, but it's creating the basis and a need for Kelly Khumalo as well as Twala to have to go onto the stand and possibly give evidence afterwards to what was taking place in certain of the relations. Obviously, it's always been the version of the defense attorneys that their clients are innocent, had nothing to do with it, and it was an accidental shooting by the people who were in the house at the time.
Ian, sensationalist, absolutely. I found it interesting today that, at least as far as I had seen during the evidence, is that the defense didn't go as far as saying who they believed had pulled the trigger. Is that a problem for their case?
I think, you know what, the problem that they're dealing with, and this is something that obviously you must, as a defense attorney, there's a certain version. You can allude to certain people, and you can make the allegations, but unless there's some concrete proof, you can't just say A, B, or C specifically did it. Because what happens if they simply did it? You're clutching at straws. If you're going to deal with a theory and a version that your client was not the guilty party, but there were others involved, and if one should call it the overall conspiracy, between people or between or an individual, it's very difficult, because once you pin your sail to that mast, you've got to be very careful on how you encounter it and go down that road of who you accuse. Because if it's not true, then basically you lose complete credibility. You can make an allegation and you can make suppositions and a hypothesis, but whether you can actually prove it, that's still subject to being able to show in a court of law.
Ian, on the issue of credibility then, as we wrap it up, the defense made it clear that part of their argument is to argue that Tumelo Madlala is not a credible witness, sometimes based on some of the things that he said in his original statement and versus how he explained to them in court today. What is the test for credibility?
Credibility is very difficult to go ahead and test for, because obviously there's always a variance in one's testimony to what's written down in a statement that is permitted. The credibility comes down to there's no specific individualized test. It's basically the honesty and understanding of the facts and how close and how persuasive you are in regards to what the witness is in actual fact saying about the facts, and that it's one version. It can't be a plethora of different versions mixed together like a chocolate chip cookie. It's got to, if you're making a cracker, you're making a cracker. You're not making a cookie with all other ingredients. There's certain degrees of time and date that may not be recalled, but it needs to be consistent within the version that's always been presented.
All right.
If one could say that from a credibility point of view.
A criminal law expert, Ian Allis. Let's leave it there for tonight. Certainly, that trial continuing to give South Africans plenty to talk about.